All right, welcome to another deep dive. Buckle up, because today we've got quite a ride ahead of us through the biggest news stories of January 15th, 2025. Now, it's a Wednesday, which means, well,
Ah,
means it's a day, like every other day, bombarded with tons of news. But don't worry, this deep dive is going to be your filter, showing you what really matters, from huge geopolitical stuff to things that'll make you scratch your head.
Yeah, it's wild to see how much happens even on what seems like a normal day. It's easy to get lost in it all, so we're here to connect the dots for you.
Totally, and we're kicking things off with what's got to be the biggest story of the day, a possible turning point in the conflict between Israel and Hamas.
After a brutal 15 months, they've finally reached a ceasefire agreement, and it's not just a timeout, it's like a whole roadmap to de-escalate things.
yeah.
Weeks of really tough back and forth to get here.
And I mean, this war has been just devastating. Thousands of casualties, Gaza, just destroyed. So even having a ceasefire is huge, a step towards peace, but got to acknowledge the human cost, right?
Absolutely, and the agreement has some crucial parts. Hamas releasing hostages gradually, hundreds of Palestinian prisoners in Israel being freed, vital humanitarian aid getting into Gaza, and people who've been displaced finally able to go home and start rebuilding.
Wow, sounds like there's a lot riding on this, but is this really a path to lasting peace? I mean, that's the big question, right?
It is the question, because
Mhm.
remember, this is a ceasefire, not like a full peace treaty. There are still massive challenges ahead. I mean, even this phased release of hostages and prisoners needs so much trust and coordination. Historically, that's been really hard to get between Israel and Hamas.
Yeah, I can see. So what are some of those potential roadblocks, things maybe this ceasefire doesn't even address?
Well, it doesn't solve the really deep-rooted stuff, like the status of Jerusalem, the Palestinian right to self-determination. Without a full peace agreement tackling those root causes, the risk of conflict, well, it just stays very real.
Yeah, cautious optimism is probably the right attitude. We can celebrate this step while realizing it's a long road ahead. Okay, switching gears a bit to a lighter story, but one that still shows how strong feelings run about this conflict. Secretary of State Blinken had a kind of awkward moment at a press conference.
Yeah, on Tuesday, while he was speaking to the media, a woman interrupted him, accused him of being the secretary of genocide because of U.S. support for Israel.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember seeing that. Pretty tense moment. Really shows how strong those emotions are, even so far away.
Totally. And it highlights, the U.S.'s complicated role in the region and also how divided public opinion can be even within the U.S. when it comes to this conflict.
Absolutely. All right. Moving on from geopolitics to the world of money, OPEC, the oil cartel, just released their forecast for global oil demand. And it's got folks talking.
Yeah, the interesting thing is they're predicting strong growth even with all the economic uncertainty out there. They're basically betting on a strong global economy.
That's a bold move for sure, especially with, the push for renewable energy and all the worries about climate change.
Right, that's the big question. Is this much reliance on oil sustainable economically and environmentally long term? Plenty of experts say OPEC's focus on oil clashes with the whole need to switch to cleaner energy.
It's a big debate for sure. This forecast kind of puts it front and center, the whole economic growth versus environmental sustainability thing. Speaking of decisions that make you go, huh, Pakistan International Airlines, PIA, managed to step right into it with a really ill-conceived ad.
Yeah, this was a cultural sensitivity fail, big time. Reminds us how easily a message can get misinterpreted globally.
Yeah, the ad had a picture of a plane, looked like it was heading straight for the Eiffel Tower, with the caption, "Paris, we are coming today."
Immediate backlash, understandable, right?
Yeah.
Comparisons to 9/11 really shows you got to think about context, history, all that when you're putting a message out there.
Absolutely. Lesson learned, especially for global companies. Even good intentions can backfire if you're not culturally aware. All right, time for a story with a bit of spy thriller vibe. Poland's prime minister is making some serious claims against Russia, saying they're planning acts of air terror targeting airlines around the world.
Yeah, this is just adding fuel to the fire, between Russia and the West, already tense as it is.
He's saying Russia is behind incidents where they sent incendiary devices on planes headed west from Lithuania, calling for a full investigation, more security, the whole nine yards.
If this is true, the implications are huge. Could escalate things between Russia and the West big time. We'll be watching this one closely for sure.
It's a reminder that tensions can simmer under the surface and then, boom, erupt unexpectedly. Now, amidst all this, a moment to reflect, the music world is mourning Linda Nolan, part of the Irish group, the Nolans.
Yeah, it's a good reminder that even with all the big news, there are always those human stories happening. Linda's passing gives us a moment to appreciate how much impact individuals can have.
Absolutely. She passed away at 65 after battling cancer for a long time, but was so beloved, known for her talent and her strength. She touched so many lives, going to be missed by fans all over.
It's a reminder to appreciate those artists who bring us joy and to admire the strength of those facing hardship with grace and courage.
Well said. Okay, back to the U.S., where it seems President-elect Trump is ready to pick up a familiar fight, trade with China.
Looks like he's going right back to where he left off, talking about new tariffs on Chinese goods could reignite that whole trade war that caused so much disruption.
He's throwing around numbers like 10% to 60% tariffs on a whole bunch of stuff, and businesses are already freaking out. Importers are stockpiling goods before those tariffs hit, and prices potentially skyrocket.
Yeah, the big question is what's this going to do to consumers, to the economy as a whole? Are we going to see another round of price hikes and market instability? Gotta watch this one closely. The effects could reach way beyond the U.S. and China.
We'll be keeping an eye on it for sure. All right, speaking of feeling the chill, let's talk weather. A winter storm is bringing some icy conditions to parts of the U.S.
Yeah, nature's a powerful force, right? Can disrupt everything in a flash. And with climate change bringing more extreme weather, being prepared is key.
Georgia and North Carolina are getting hit hard, dangerous roads, freezing temperatures, schools are closed, travel advisories are out.
This kind of weather really tests our infrastructure, our emergency preparedness, reminds us how important it is to have strong systems in place, especially as climate change brings more of these extreme situations.
A good wake-up call to be ready for whatever Mother Nature throws at us. Okay, back to politics. President-elect Trump's cabinet nominees are in the hot seat this week. Senate confirmation hearings are underway.
These hearings are a crucial part of the transition of power. They give us a peek into what Trump's second term might look like, who's going to be calling the shots.
Yeah, all eyes are on people like Pam Bondi up for Attorney General, Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, and John Ratcliffe for CIA Director. They're going to face some tough questions, and everyone's going to be reading into their answers.
Yeah, and you can bet these hearings are going to be a political battleground. Democrats are going to use this chance to push back on the nominees, their qualifications, potential conflicts of interest, all that. It's high stakes for sure. The balance of power in Washington is kind of up in the air as these confirmation battles play out.
It's a political drama, that's for sure, and it's going to shape American politics for years to come. While Washington battles it out, Southern California is bracing for another round of extreme fire weather.
Yeah, this ongoing threat really shows the challenge of climate change and the need to be proactive, not just fighting fires when they happen, but managing forests, creating defensible spaces, educating people about fire safety.
Strong Santa Ana winds, dry conditions, lots of fuel. It's a recipe for disaster, and the area is still recovering from the recent fires, so this is adding to the anxiety.
Absolutely. It shows that climate change isn't some far-off problem. It's here, it's now, and it needs action. We got to prioritize policies that deal with the root causes of climate change, invest in ways to adapt and mitigate the damage.
It's a call to action for everyone. Governments, businesses, individuals. We got to take responsibility for protecting our planet and making a safer future. Okay, now for a development that's shaking things up in South Korea, the arrest of their impeached president, Yoon Suk-yeol.
Wow, this is a historic moment for them. The first time a former president has been arrested raises big questions about political stability and the rule of law in the country.
For context, Yoon was impeached after trying to impose martial law. He'd been holed up in his residence, defying arrest until now.
This arrest is a huge twist in a political drama that's had the whole nation glued, reminds us that even in democracies that seem stable, power struggles can happen. Constitutional crises can erupt, putting institutions and the rule of law to the test.
We'll be watching this one unfold for sure. All right, let's shift gears to social media, where there's a new battle brewing, the race to replace TikTok.
With TikTok's future uncertain, tech companies are scrambling to fill that void. They want those users. They want that ad revenue. It's high stakes, innovation, and keeping users engaged are the keys to winning.
We're seeing the next generation of social media being born right before our eyes. New features, formats, algorithms, all trying to grab attention.
It's a glimpse into the future of how we connect and create online, who's going to be the big dog in this rapidly evolving world.
The winner's going to have a huge impact on how we get information and entertainment. All right, before we wrap up our dive into January 15th, 2025, a few more noteworthy stories, maybe not headline grabbers, but still important.
These are the kind of stories that remind us that even with all the big global events, there are human stories happening everywhere.
First up, a Canadian truck driver caught with a huge load of cocaine. reminds us of the constant fight against international drug trafficking. This bust shows how these criminal networks work across borders, finding loopholes and making profits illegally.
Raises questions about border security, the need for countries to work together to stop these operations. It's a reminder that fighting drug trafficking is an ongoing battle with big consequences for everyone, individuals, communities, whole countries.
Absolutely. Next, a story about accountability and the tough task of dealing with allegations, especially in the literary world. Acclaimed author Neil Gaiman, fantasy dark stuff, is in hot water.
Multiple women have come forward with accusations of sexual abuse, really tarnishing his reputation and legacy. Gaiman has admitted and apologized for his actions, but this brings up big questions about power, consent, and being held accountable, especially in creative fields.
It shows how important it is to listen to and believe survivors, how brave they are to come forward. And it highlights the need for more transparency and accountability in industries where power imbalances can create breeding grounds for abuse.
It's a reminder that even people we admire can be flawed, their actions have consequences, and we need to check our biases, hold those with power accountable, create safe spaces for everyone.
And as we look back on this day, we come to a moment of transition and reflection, saying goodbye to a leader who's guided the nation through tough times.
President Biden is giving his farewell address later tonight, marking the end of his presidency and the start of a new chapter.
It's a chance for him to look back at what he's done, acknowledge the challenges that are still there, and offer a message of hope and unity to the country. This speech is a big moment in American history, a time to look back, to renew, and to look ahead to what's next.
It's a chance for us as citizens to assess where we are, to think about what Biden's done, and to have real conversations about where we want to go as a nation.
And that's what we're all about here at The Deep Dive, giving you the context, the insights, the tools to think critically and make sense of this crazy world.
We want you to join the conversation, challenge your own ideas, and help build a more informed and engaged society.
Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll dig deeper into these stories and find the connections that shape our world.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Let's dig a little deeper into some of those stories, starting with that potential turning point in the Israel-Hamas conflict. That ceasefire, it's a big step, no doubt, but making it stick long term, that all comes down to those deeper issues we talked about.
You're right, easy to get swept up in the good vibes of a ceasefire. But this conflict's got layers, a lot of history. What are some of those historical things that have led to this whole mess?
Well, you've got two groups, both claiming the same land as theirs, Israelis and Palestinians, both saying they have historical and religious ties. Then you have Israel being established in 1948 after the Holocaust and all the Zionist movement, but that led to a ton of Palestinians being displaced, created a refugee crisis that's still a major factor in the tension today.
So, beyond just making this ceasefire work, there's a whole web of history, politics, all tangled up. Gotta untangle that for any real peace to happen. What are some ways they could maybe try to solve these issues that have been around for so long?
Well, a lot of people say a two-state solution is the way to go, an independent Palestine alongside Israel. But that means figuring out borders, security, what to do about Jerusalem, the right of return for Palestinian refugees, huge compromises on both sides.
Yeah, it sounds like a monumental task, but absolutely essential for both Israelis and Palestinians to have a future. The world's watching to see if this ceasefire can lead to real dialogue. And ultimately, a lasting peace. Okay, let's go back to that moment with Secretary Blinken, the woman who called him out for supporting genocide. It was short, but it was powerful. Really showed how divided people are about this conflict.
Yeah, it wasn't just about her outburst. It reflects a bigger trend. People getting more and more polarized, not just in the U.S., but globally. Social media, news sources being so fragmented. It's created these echo chambers where people only see stuff that agrees with what they already think.
So how do we bridge that gap? How do we have productive conversations about these tough topics, especially when people are so passionate?
We got to encourage critical thinking, media literacy, help people spot bias and fake news. We also got to promote empathy, understanding, create spaces for respectful dialogue, even when you disagree. It's about really listening to the other side, trying to find common ground.
Absolutely. Super important now more than ever. It's easy to get stuck in your own little world and think the worst of people who see things differently. All right, let's move from the world of politics to, well, the equally complicated world of economics. OPEC's prediction about oil demand has got people talking. Saying oil demand will be strong seems kind of opposite of the whole push for renewable energy, right?
Yeah, it shows the tension between what's good for the economy right now versus what's good for the environment long term. Truth is, the world still runs on fossil fuels, and moving to renewables, it's complicated. Lots of moving parts.
So are we kind of stuck? Do we focus on economic growth, even if it makes climate change worse? Or do we put the environment first and risk hurting the economy?
It's not the black and white. We need a smarter approach, one that balances both. That means investing in renewable tech, policies that encourage energy efficiency, cut emissions, and countries working together to tackle climate change globally.
Huge challenge, but we can't ignore it. Our planet's future depends on finding ways to meet our energy needs without crashing the environment. Okay, let's shift to a story that reminds us about cultural sensitivity, or rather, what happens when you don't have it, that PIA ad. Yikes.
Totally tone deaf, bringing up 9/11, showing they just didn't get how sensitive people are about terrorism, especially in the West. Companies going global, they got to be aware of cultural differences, really think about how their message will be perceived, have diverse voices involved.
It's about more than just avoiding bad press. It's about building trust, connecting with people around the world authentically.
Yeah, cultural sensitivity is key to creating marketing that's genuine, impactful, and respects people's values and experiences.
A good reminder that in our connected world, words and images have power. Got to be careful and aware. Okay, let's dive into that spy thriller story. Poland accusing Russia of plotting air terror.
This, if it's true, is a serious escalation between Russia and the West. Got to remember these are accusations, needs more investigation.
But even the claim itself is worrisome. What would Russia's motive be? And what does this mean for global security?
Well, they're saying Russia put incendiary devices on planes flying west from Lithuania. If that's true, it could be a way to scare people, cause chaos, make people distrust air travel, feel vulnerable.
Pretty scary thought. Makes you wonder how the world should respond. What do you think will happen?
If they find proof, could be sanctions, kicking out diplomats, maybe even military moves. It's a tense situation. Any escalation could have huge consequences.
Reminds us that with all the geopolitical tension, even small things can set things off, push us closer to conflict. We'll be watching to see what happens with this one. All right, let's move to a story that reminds us about the power of music and the human side of the news. Linda Nolan passing away.
Yeah, Linda's story is inspiring. She fought cancer for so long, but she never gave up, kept performing, kept inspiring people. Her music brought joy to millions. Her legacy will live on through her songs and the memories she made for her fans.
It reminds us to appreciate the artists who make our lives better and to admire the strength of those who face hardship head on. Okay, back to politics. President-elect Trump's second term is starting to take shape. Those Senate confirmation hearings are happening.
These hearings give us a peek into what Trump's administration might be like, who's going to be influencing his decisions. The people he's nominated are a mix of folks from his first term and some new faces, each with their own ideas and experiences.
And you know those hearings are going to be intense. Democrats are going to grill the nominees about their qualifications, any conflicts of interest. It's going to be a battle. What are some key things we should watch for during these hearings? What are the potential hot topics?
The nominees for Attorney General, Secretary of State, and CIA Director, those are going to be under the microscope. Their roles are super important for both domestic and foreign policy, so those hearings are going to be where different visions for America's role in the world clash.
It's a political drama that'll impact American politics for years to come. We'll be watching closely to see how the power dynamics shift and what it means for the country. Speaking of precarious situations, let's go back to Southern California. Those wildfires are a constant threat, a reminder of how much climate change is impacting us.
Those Santa Ana winds, dry conditions, all that fuel, it's a recipe for disaster. And these fires, they don't just threaten lives and property, they devastate the environment, destroy habitats, pollute the air, and even contribute to climate change itself.
A vicious cycle. Got to take a multi-pronged approach. What are some things they can do to tackle this growing threat?
They need to invest in managing the forests, reduce the fuel that feeds the fires, make the forests healthier, controlled burns, thinning out trees, getting rid of dead stuff, all that. And they got to update building codes, land use planning, make communities more resistant to fire.
It's not just about reacting when a fire starts. It's about being proactive, reducing the risk, building resilience as the climate changes. It's about taking care of our planet, making sure future generations have a safe place to live. Okay, back to South Korea. The arrest of that former president, Yoon Suk-yeol, that's big news.
It's a huge moment in their history, shows that nobody's above the law, not even a president, a sign that their democracy is strong. They're committed to upholding the rule of law.
It does make you wonder what this means for politics in South Korea. Could things get unstable? What about the region?
It could lead to more political turmoil, more division. Yoon's supporters might see this as a political hit job. It could also hurt relations with other countries, especially if the investigation finds he did stuff that affected other countries too.
Shows how connected everything is. Something happens in one country, and it can impact the whole region, even the world. All right, lastly, let's go back to the tech world. That race to replace TikTok, it's a sign of how fast social media changes. People always want the next big thing.
TikTok's gone, and these tech companies are like sharks smelling blood. They all want those users that sweet ad money. It's all about keeping people's attention, coming up with new features, making the experience so good they keep coming back for more.
It's fascinating to watch, gives us a glimpse into the future of social media, how we'll communicate online. Whoever wins, they're not just going to be the king of social media, they're going to shape how we get information, connect with each other, express ourselves online.
It reminds us that technology never stops moving. We got to be ready to adapt, stay informed, to keep up with it all.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive into January 15th, 2025, and wow, what a day, right? From hope in the Middle East to a president getting arrested and the fight for the future of social media.
Yeah, a real whirlwind. It shows you how connected everything is. What happens in one place can have a ripple effect across the whole world.
Taking a step back, looking at the big picture, what stands out to you the most?
The contrasts, you've got this chance for peace between Israel and Hamas, which is huge. But then you've got Russia and the West at each other's throats, those accusations of air terror, the U.S. and China may be going back to a trade war.
It's like a reality check. Progress can be so fragile. We can celebrate the good stuff, but got to keep an eye on those things that could pull us back into conflict.
Definitely shows how important diplomacy is. Talking to each other, finding common ground, even when it seems impossible.
Another thing that struck me, how much individuals can shape what happens. The woman who confronted Blinken, Linda Nolan's legacy, those tech folks trying to be the next TikTok.
Yeah, they're all leaving their mark, challenging authority, inspiring people, pushing innovation forward. Reminds us that we can all make a difference, no matter how big or small our platform is.
And that we're not just watching the news happen, we're part of it. Our choices, our actions, what we say, it all adds up.
Exactly. Staying informed, thinking critically, talking about these things, that's how we can push the world in a better direction.
So as we wrap up, what are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will remember?
First off, don't tune out. Stay informed. Engage with what's happening in the world. The news can be a lot, but it's important to understand the stuff that's shaping our lives.
Couldn't agree more. And I hope they remember that even on days that seem ordinary, amazing stories are happening. Stories that show how complex our world is, how resilient people are, and how things can get better or worse.
Keep exploring these stories. Look for different perspectives. Talk to people about what you learn, even if you disagree.
Because that's how we make sense of it all. Informed discussions, critical thinking, challenging what we think we know. That's the deep dive. We'll be back soon with another dive into the news. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.